And good afternoon. This is The Guys Next Door. I'm your host, Ron Arenas, with my co-host, Pastor John McClain.
Yes, sir.
Brought to you by Picture Rocks Cooling, Heating, and Plumbing. Keeping you cool all summer long.
All summer long.
It's coming.
Yeah.
The heat is coming.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
And most people aren't, but I am.
Yeah.
I know you're not a big fan of the heat, huh?
Oh, I love the heat.
Oh, you love the heat.
Well,
okay.
my bank account loves
the
the
heat. But you like
heat.
the cold. You like the cold and the heat. How does that work?
I like extremes.
Okay.
Yeah, it
fair
keeps
enough.
us busy.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That is very interesting in relation to your temperament, because you have a very calm temperament.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
I think it's just mostly business related. We like the extremes because
Okay.
then we're
fair
really
enough.
busy.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. That, being in the heating and cooling business, yeah.
Yeah,
Those extremes
exactly.
are very helpful.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, that's when
Yeah.
people pick up the phone and they say, "Hey, I have a serious problem that only you can fix." And you're like, "Well,
That's right.
I'm your man."
Yeah, no one cares about us when it's 70 degrees
For
outside.
sure. when the air conditioner's working great and when everything's ticking along, they're like, we're not worried about you. But as soon as it gets 3 degrees too cold or too hot, you
Right.
become a very popular man.
Well, speaking of heat,
Yeah.
right now it's the favorite time of year for us, but the heat is on for the Arizona Wildcats. It's time for them to perform. And with us today is my good friend Mike Luke, and we're going to talk about Wildcats.
Yes, sir. Ron, very excited to be here, and awesome awesome watching you from this point of view, man. You're
Yeah,
natural
thanks.
for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The last time that we're on air together was almost exactly 4 years ago,
Yeah.
right before the world ended.
Right. I was going to say right before everything torpedoed, essentially.
Yeah,
So,
We were sitting outside T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas at the Pac-12 tournament, and we were doing a post-game show, and everyone was coming up to us saying, "We heard these rumors that they're going to shut down the Pac-12 tournament." We're like, "There's no way.
Get out of here. Yeah.
That's just too much money. That's no way." Yeah.
And then it was wild. Then you started hearing about buffets being shut down.
Yeah.
Essentially, I remember when I left Vegas, and it was a ghost town
It
within
was.
36, 48 hours. I mean, everybody was on that 310 to Yuma. I mean, getting out of there. But,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It was wild.
It was. And we stayed. We stayed all the way until Sunday, and it was a complete ghost town.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you could go anywhere you wanted to go in Vegas.
Well, it was weird because my flight didn't leave until Sunday, and then I started looking at it. I'm thinking to myself, I hope they don't ground all these flights. So then you start wondering, you're like, okay, am I going to be able to get out of here? Am I going to be
Yeah.
able? Because it literally was when everything hit the fan at that point. I mean, you
Yeah.
started here, and I think that Tom Hanks was diagnosed or came down with COVID or whatever at that time.
okay.
Yeah, and I just remember that's when you started seeing celebrities get it.
Yeah.
And
And that's when it got serious.
yeah, that's when we could all relate when Tom Hanks
Yeah,
got
that's
COVID.
right.
Yes.
And then the next day after that, Monday, is when they closed down all the casinos.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've just never seen Vegas like that.
No. Hopefully we'll never
we
see the world.
again.
Yeah, like that again.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about some Wildcats basketball. We
Let's do it.
just came off a really ugly basketball game yesterday, last night.
Yeah. And honestly, it was just frustrating because Arizona had been playing such good ball. We were talking about it before that, after the UCLA game, all systems go. All the pieces are meshing, all 5 starters, certainly, playing very good basketball. The 3 reserves off the bench. You look at it as a nice combination of experience, youth, players that have been there. And Arizona clinches the Pac-12 tournament, Pac-12 regular season championship.
Right.
And you're thinking, okay, well, this is just going to be a formality against USC. Well,
Right.
it was a formality. They didn't show up.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, it was wild, though, Ron. I did not expect to see that.
No, not at all. Not like that. I could have seen a close game maybe that we lost to,
Right.
but they just, like you said, they didn't even show up.
And I think that's what's frustrating, too, is that, listen, you want to be sympathetic to the fact that these are 18, 19-year-old kids, but they're also kind of professionals at this point. I mean, they're getting some of that Picture Rocks heating, cooling, and plumbing money right there. But, on a serious note, though, it's difficult because you're dealing with kids that are essentially being paid as professionals, and you also have to remind yourself that they're 18 and they're still going to have lapses and whatnot.
That's true. Yeah.
But again, just not a performance that I saw coming. LeBron James was there on the front row.
Yeah.
And it just looked like they wanted to be anywhere but there. And you kept waiting for them to, all right, when's Arizona going to flip that switch?
Right.
And it just never happened.
Yeah.
Was there any other differential in lineup or anything else going on, or was it just kind of it was the same thing we'd usually see? It was just literally they just didn't show up.
That's man, you just hit the nail on the head.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
they just didn't look like they wanted to be there. There were careless turnovers. There was, Arizona's best player, Caleb Love, goes 1 of 10 from the field.
Right.
It wasn't even the 1 of 10 that bothered me so much. It was the 5 turnovers and he had a couple of them where it looked like he just handed the ball to USC.
That and some forced shots.
Yeah.
It just looks like, he was just not setting up the way that they should have set up.
Yeah, and I think that's just what's frustrating, and that's what's a little bit concerning about this team. Again, I don't want to be a sky is falling person because it's a great basketball team.
It
for
is.
Sure.
It is.
But at the end of the day, they've also had some very perplexing losses. This is the team that can go in and beat Duke in Cameron Indoor Stadium, and then the next week you're losing to Oregon State.
Right.
I mean,
and Oregon State is horrible.
They're the worst team in the conference. So there's really no rhyme or reason as to how this team ticks, and I think that's for an Arizona fan. I think that's what's kind of concerning, especially because this team's going to be judged come March.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, we're in March, but but Tommy Lloyd, he's done a great job here. But let's be honest here, and during the NCAA tournament, they've been kind of soft.
Yeah, they have.
You've had 4 games. In one game, you were tied, I believe, with Wright State in the first 1 versus 16 seed. Then you should have probably lost to TCU the following game. Then you got smoked by Houston, and then you lost to Princeton in the first round last year. So it's not a sterling resume at this point.
No, not at all.
Right. Is there a pattern to the teams that the U of A has been losing to this year, particularly the Oregon State and USC? Is there do they have issues with big men? Do they have issues with certain type of guards, or what is their Achilles heel?
Well, they're really bad at defending the 3-point shot. They lost to Stanford earlier this year, another bad team. Yeah. And essentially, Stanford went 14 of 13 from 3-point range. They're shooting 135% from 3-point range, and a lot of the time is guys just they don't cover them. And I
just let them have it.
Yeah, and I think some of the theory is they'll end up missing eventually. Well, that works sometimes.
Right.
It doesn't.
And sometimes
always.
it doesn't. Yeah, if they get hot.
Well, usually, particularly with shooters, if you don't put pressure on them, they're going to make most of them. That's how it works.
And then when you start get going. When you start feeling that
feeling
rhythm,
it.
I mean, then all of a sudden you're shooting at another apex that you hadn't even reached at that point.
The hoop's an ocean, and everything goes in.
Exactly. Yeah. Very well put. It's like you're shooting with a tennis ball or something. And everything's going in.
Yeah. We definitely needed a bigger basket yesterday.
We should write them about that. Right. Can we get a bigger basket than the other team next time?
That's right.
Hey, we won't tell anyone.
Yeah, that's right.
I've always wondered too with coaches where, if you know that your team is just for whatever reason is just emotionally checked out. I've always wondered what is your strategy then, because it didn't look like there was one.
Yeah, their body language was not good.
Yeah, that's very well put. It just when you see somebody that just clearly doesn't want to be where they're at, or they're just going through the motions. That was last night to a T.
Yeah.
And again, I guess it just surprised me a little bit because you're looking at a possible number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. I get, LeBron James is there, and just lay an egg. That's the best way I could put it. And there wasn't even a point where you were waiting for that Arizona to hit you with that 13-2 run. It just didn't even feel like they were capable of that last night. And then, lo and behold, it's USC that hits you with that run in the second half. So it was just a comedy of errors. It was an awful performance.
Yeah. Yeah. And USC is improved. I mean, they have gone back, 2 or 3 of their players, their top players.
And they were USC was supposed to be the second best team in the conference going into the year. I mean, they got they have a loaded roster. Their point guard is a projected top 5 to 10 pick in the NBA draft. They got back Boogie Ellis with a lot of NIL money, who averaged 20 per game last year. You obviously got LeBron's son, and up front you got some big men as well. They've not been what people thought they were, but they have a lot of talent, though.
They do have a lot of talent, yeah.
And, I mean, you saw that last night. There's a lot of games, like when you're watching Arizona against Oregon State, you're like, all right, well, you've got Ron Arenas and Mike Luke out there playing Arizona. You should never win that game. Well, maybe Ron.
I was playing center.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, he uses his body a lot. So, yeah, he's good on leverage.
And I was flanking Ron at power forward. So. But there was, with SC, though, they're kind of on the all airport team in that they, you watch them when they come out there and you're like, all right, they look the part. And I think that's where it was a little odd that they took care, that they got handled in that manner.
Nice.
All right, we'll be back in just a few minutes with Mike Luke talking about Arizona basketball.
This is the guys next door.
Co-host Pastor John McClain, and we're talking to Mike Luke about Wildcats basketball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is fun. Yeah, I want to pick this up after the show ends, and we'll just sit in here and talk.
Right, for sure. Well, that's when you know you're having a good time, when you're already it's like, hey, yeah, right,
right.
Yeah, and honestly, like I always say, when it comes to sports, we're not curing cancer. This is the toy section of entertainment.
Yeah, definitely.
Have fun with it.
It is. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. That's what we need to do. We need to have fun with it.
I'll never forget when I was working at another station. There was a guest host that came in one time from. Where was he from? Phoenix, and he had been in it a long time. But he came in there, and everything was just so rigid. I mean, Ron, to his credit, has a full sheet of notes right here.
Right. It took me a while to get him to that point, but yes.
Yes. Yeah. But you know what? It takes a village.
Yeah.
So, but he comes in here, and I kid you not, we're doing a 2-hour show, and he must have had 5 pages front to back.
Wow.
Every transition was totally to a T, and
that was my first radio show for sure.
Right.
Okay.
But to your credit though, that's your first radio station. This guy had been doing it for like 40 years, and and he was so wound about just everything, and I was like, man, this looks miserable.
And it is, and it doesn't come off well at all from a listener's standpoint.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been in this a long time. It just when.
You want to have a conversation,
Because nobody says in life, they don't say, well, allow me to redirect now to the main point at hand while we, nobody talks like that. And I just remember thinking, that is not what I want to do. So, just an interesting situation for sure.
Yeah. Just a quick side note. When I first started my first radio show, like you're saying, 5 pages front and back, read every single word that came across, and it was horrible. Don't Google it.
And then you go back and listen to it, and you're like, man, I sounded like a robot.
Absolutely.
Because nobody's looking to tune into something where it's like, like we just talked about, they're looking to tune into something where, okay, it just sounds like me and my buddies talking or whatever.
With quick one-liners, particularly from Ron.
Yeah, well, Ron's the king of the boat right here. Yes, exactly. Ron has the big throne right here. We're sitting on the little one.
This little one's, hey, can I help you, sir?
Yeah. All right, so back to the program.
Now allow us to redirect back.
Yeah, let's redirect. Mike, how long have you been covering the Wildcats?
Professionally for about 14 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How'd you get a start in it?
Jody Yaler is a good buddy of mine. He's up in Phoenix at 910 now, and I had just graduated from the U of A, and I had a print journalism degree, which comes to find out in my last year, one of my professors said, yeah, everybody in here, you're not going to make any money doing any of this. I'm like, well, thanks for telling me now.
Nice. Yeah.
Don't tell me as a freshman. Tell me after you've taken all my money.
Yeah.
And then he said, we don't have anything, but he directed me to another station. I almost said up the street, more like 25 miles up the street. But and I went in there and I told him, I gave him my resume. I told him, I said, listen, I'll do pretty much anything you want. I get that this is a very competitive industry to get into. And they said, well, we don't really have anything right now. And I told him, and his name was Rob Lance, still a good friend of mine. I told him, I said, listen, man, I said, I will scrub the toilets. I will mop the corners. Hey, see that cobweb over there? I can pull that off as well. Yeah, and I didn't hear anything from him.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting ready to go back. I'm getting ready to go work on my master's. And then I get a call from Rob, and he tells me, he says, well, we got a board op position that just opened up. And he said, it's only about 20 hours a week, minimum wage. Are you in? Yes. There was no
hesitation.
I called. It's funny too because I called the U of A and I had gotten some a fairly nice little grant for the program, and I was explaining the situation to the lady, and she obviously didn't quite understand, and she's like, "And you're going to not do this program because for this 20-hour per week minimum wage job?" And I said, "Yes, I get it." But there's also some things too, and I know it's kind of corny, but you got to go with your heart. And I always felt that I could go back and get into a program like that. I didn't know that this opportunity would really pass. So long story short, they have their own show. One of the hosts leaves, and then Kevin Woodman pushes for me to be his co-host. And we did the afternoon show from 3 to 6 for about 8 years or so.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a fun run for sure.
That's cool.
And,
It
you know,
was, yeah.
and just being, in your mid to late 20s at the time, it's kind of surreal because, you're used to listening to people that are, especially growing up, because all I did was listen to radio. You're used to listening to people that are significantly older than that. And it was one of those things, like I was always just kind of like pinching myself saying, man, am I really doing this?
Yeah, right.
And, but then I also got to meet people like the great Ron Arenas.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, you don't really know what, you don't really know in life sometimes what's going to hit, and sometimes it hits. So yeah, that was my radio journey here in Tucson. Yeah.
Nice.
That's really cool.
That's super
Yeah.
cool.
For sure. And I always tell people too that talking to like U of A kids or whatever, I'll just say something to the effect of, listen, man, it's your life. It's not your parents' life. It's not if you're going to do something, go all out and do it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't work if you want to take something the non-conventional route, but you're not prepared to put 110% into that, then it's probably not going to work. The only thing you want is, and I always think back to this quote from Kobe Bryant where he said, I look back at myself at the end of the day, and sure, maybe I didn't reach Michael Jordan's status in a lot of people's eyes, but I know I looked in the mirror and I squeezed everything out of that marrow that I could to come to basketball. I woke up, and he said, I never wanted to be that guy that woke up, and not to compare myself to Kobe Bryant, obviously.
Close, though.
Yeah, close. Yeah. The name recognition is fairly similar. But it's a quote, though, that always kind of stuck with me that, he said, I woke up, and sure, maybe I wasn't Mike, but I got everything out of my God-given ability, and you know what? Now it's time to work on, my daughter's knock on wood. So
Yeah.
It
Fantastic.
was a pretty cool quote, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And what are you doing now?
All right, so now I got hired for PHNX Sports. Along with partnered with DraftKings and now BetMGM, and they basically they gave me a really nice contract offer to come over. I wasn't thrilled at the time with where some of the things were going at the radio station, and basically when they offered me the contract, I just said, well, again, where do I sign? And it's been surreal. So basically, I'll do 5 shows a week. I get to travel a lot. There's a lot more disposable income in place. So yeah, it's it's a blast. Like I said, it's still working in the toy section.
Yeah. It's cool job.
Yeah. And how do people find you? How do people find your podcast?
So you can go on Twitter. You can follow me at Iron Mike Luke, PHNX_Wildcats. Obviously on Twitter, YouTube. Check out the YouTube channel. Give it a like. Give it a subscription. And like I said, I appreciate all the support out there. It's been very flattering.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes you have hour shows and sometimes you have shorter shows, right?
Right. So we have a post-game show after every single game.
Oh, okay.
And a big part of that rationale was, and something that really appealed to me was that, and again, Brian Jeffries, the GOAT, the man.
Right.
Everybody should listen to Brian Jeffries.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's amazing. But I think a lot of times what people want to do is right after a game, they want to be able to vent. They don't want to have to wait 45 minutes to an hour. Now, granted, Brian's the man, but I think a lot of times people just want to vent. And that's something. So we get a lot of, we got a lot of traction on post games. Then during the day, 10:30 during the week. Yeah. So that's where you can find me though.
Very good. Very good.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So what do you feel about this team going forward?
Honestly, that's a great question. This team,
let him gather his words here.
Yeah. This team, guys, could lose in the second round. This team could win the national championship.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's that there's really no middle ground. There's really no middle ground whatsoever here. I have a hard time seeing this team just making the Sweet 16 and bowing out. It feels like if they get into that second week, feels like they're going to go some places. But
yeah, I think so. I think if they can get into that groove, that rhythm.
Because again, this is a team. It's weird too, because as an Arizona fan, you always have high expectations because it's a basketball program. But the one thing about them though is that they're maddeningly inconsistent, and it's like I said, it's one thing if you got a bunch of freshmen out there, if you're throwing a bunch of young kids out there, but I mean, a lot of these guys, you got guys on this team that are 23 years old, 22 years old.
Yeah, they're pretty senior heavy.
Yeah, so, to me, it's just, but it just doesn't make a ton of sense. But as long as they take care of business in the Pac-12 tournament, they should be able to get a 2 seed out west.
Yeah.
And then it's game on at that point, If you, but again, like Tommy Lloyd, he's the all-time winningest coach in college basketball history through his first 3 seasons, which is obviously.
That's pretty amazing.
It's super amazing.
Yeah.
But this is kind of the gratification society we live in, though, that he's going to be judged come his postseason at this point. We've got all the regular season wins. It's it's kind of like the pitcher that can throw no-hitters during the regular season, but come postseason, you're still waiting to see those no-hitters.
Right.
And it's time to see some no-hitters.
Yeah, and definitely the inconsistency doesn't bode well to that in the tournament,
Right.
for sure, because it's like you're saying. I'm glad you pointed that out, because in watching the U of A games over the season, there's some games where you're just like, wow, this is like the U of A team of old.
Right.
Like,
Right.
is that Sean Elliott? Like, what's going on here?
Right.
And then you have yesterday, that kind of, you're like,
Ron Arenas is out there.
yeah. Why is Ron playing center? That doesn't make sense. But
Again.
Yeah, but that's where I think it's just so mind-boggling, because you look at some of the best teams in the country, like UConn is probably, if I'm not picking Arizona, I believe UConn's the best team in the country.
Yeah, they look really good.
UConn smashes teams.
Yeah.
They don't have the let-up games where it doesn't look like they really want to be there. They don't, Houston's somewhat the same way. They're not as good as UConn, but I think Arizona fans, they're just like, wait a second. Why are all these other teams doing this and we aren't doing that? And again, it's going to be a big time. Ron Arenas is going to be up there though, covering it.
Yep. We'll be up there. We'll be checking it out in Las Vegas. Well, thank you, Mike Luke.
Of course.
I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
This was the Guys Next Door. Join us next week.
CBS News Brief. Hopes for a ceasefire in Gaza before Ramadan are now dashed. Aaron David Miller